All right, it is The Drive, but without Brian. As some of you have heard, he's on a brief medical leave today, but it is your MTV refugee, peripheral visionary, and tour guide to the far side, Dez Dickerson, in for Brian today. Now, I flipped on the radio in the car for a minute yesterday and heard him, I just heard him utter the word catheter, and I just went into PTSD, and I had to turn the radio off.
I think all of us did, yeah.
It's just like, oh, that's the one thing. That's the kryptonite right there. I hate those bad boys. But anyway, so I hear he's doing well, though. Listen on the way in, hear he's doing well.
He is in recovery, yes.
Good deal. Well, aren't we all? No, just kidding.
Well, no.
Well, we wish him well, and hopefully he'll slide right back in tomorrow. So, some of you have, Chris Webber and Mac the Nice, or I need to call him Mac the Newsman now, I think.
I know, in a different room this time around, Des.
Different hat on today.
It's like Alice in Wonderland. Things change so quickly here. But anyways, it's good to be back. Good to be back in the chair in a time slot I've never been in before. So this is going to be interesting. Some of you heard me in the 9 to noon slot, or in for Matt. For some of you, this is the first time, and I want to be your favorite substitute teacher. And hopefully I am for some of you already. But I remember back in school, there were certain substitute teachers that you might have, that she was like, first call on the list or whatever. And it was like, all right, it's Miss, whoever. And I want to be that substitute teacher. And then there were those other substitute teachers that were like, we're going to torment this person because we don't like her or him. Sometimes it was a him. So we're on the drive. The drive might be a wild ride today. We're not in Kansas anymore, Toto. We might, take some sharp turns, or maybe even go off-road, who knows? So keep your restraint device locked at all times. So I'm going to give you the little, I'm going to stripe the field the way I normally would when I do the show. We're no longer in the era of red versus blue, of right versus left, of conservative versus liberal. We are living in the age of reality versus unreality. And that's glaringly apparent if you listen to the news or walk out your front door at this point in time. See, in America, we've gone from different perspectives to different planets. Gone are the days when differences of opinion were polite, when you could agree to disagree. Because this whole unreality thing, see, rather than talk about the left or the woke or the this or the that, I just call it the unreality cohort. And they reserve unto themselves the right to recreate reality in their own image and define and redefine every aspect of life, both theirs and yours. And to accomplish it, now they had to hijack the language. And, we have to take some responsibility because we let them do it. Because words mean things. So a lot of folks talk about taking back the country. Well, before we can take the country back, we have to take the language back. Because if you control the language of a people, you control the people. And the unreality cohort are the tribe of it is if we say it is. Calling a thing something other than what the thing is doesn't change the thing, but if you accept it, which a lot of people have and a lot of people do, it can alter your perception of the thing, whatever that may be. Conservative. That's why I don't use the word conservative anymore. Because, as Rush Limbaugh so articulately and eloquently stated years ago, it means racist, sexist, bigot, homophobe, xenophobe, whatever. So I don't call myself a conservative anymore. I'm a clear thinker now. Every clear thinker adheres to conservative principles, but not every self-identified conservative is a clear thinker. So that's why I founded the Clear Thinkers Party, so we can all kind of get this thing going in the right direction. And we're on a mission to separate the clear thinkers from the Kool-Aid drinkers and make America think. Yeah, let's let the cartoon begin. Oh,
Sorry, that was my first time with that.
it's all right.
Wasn't sure.
You know, the king of cartoons throws everybody at first, but we get our timing. So we got a lot to talk about today. You know, we're going to talk about Joy Behar. You know, she waxed eloquent regarding the economy here in the last couple of days. We are going to talk, you know, a little bit about the Biden apocalypse and what it portends for us all. Now we're going to find out if REM was right. Is it the end of the world as we know it? We have a Barack Obama, I told you so. And I'm just going to let that be a surprise, but it's an I told you so. We got to have the Schadenfreude spotlight. We got to talk about the U.S. women's soccer team just for a minute. And some other cool things, you know. John Kerry's on a new climate crusade. Got to talk about that. So we got a few things on tap. Excited to be here. Glad to be with you again. Glad to be with you again in a time slot that I'm not familiar with, and looking forward to kind of experiencing this one. You know, normally this is the time of day where some people call it I have a low energy cycle. So I don't think that's going to happen though, because just sitting here in front of this microphone with this bright red foam pop filter, which kind of makes me think of Ronald McDonald. Hey, you know, how can you be low energy? So, like I said, we're gonna pivot to Joy Behar here in a minute. We're keeping an eye on the weather, you know, because supposedly we're supposed to have like the Wizard of Oz possible twister here in the afternoon, and then the encore tonight. So we're keeping an eye on that. Hopefully everybody's staying safe, and if you can, stay dry, stay inside. And you know what I think we're going to do, Chris? I think we're going to take our break just a little tiny bit early, and give a little more time for after the break to talk about Joy Behar, and we'll be right back.
Staying weather aware here today as we are expecting possible severe storms coming in two different ways. Some breaking news, the state of Tennessee being sued. Florida's governor suspends a local state attorney for being soft on crime. Plus, some trespassing at the soccer game last night. That and more, 3:30 Super Talk, 99.7 WTN.
All right. Now it's on. See, all I got to do is hear some Seven Dust, and I get my second wind.
Yeah, let's go.
I don't want anybody to drive off the road, though. So if you have to just pull over and take deep breaths, we'll be all right.
Or headbang, one or the other.
There we go.
Yes.
See, if I still could, I would. They fused my neck, so I have to I have to upper torso bang now. Because if I just forget myself and then one day just go for it, I'm going to hear this crack and my head might roll across the floor. But yeah, you got to love it though. So I'm sitting here and there's a TV in the studio, and a lot of times I'll come in and whatever will be on, but CNN was on, and I have to confess my faults one to another. I just get angry if I see the CNN logo. I just can't. I can't look up and see CNN. It throws me off my game. So I changed stations to, I don't know, some sports thing. But there was just a commercial for this. There's this thing on Hulu called Only Murders in the Building. Have you guys ever seen that thing?
I've heard about it.
I've seen it.
Steve Martin Short.
Yeah. And those guys are so funny. They're so like 21st century vaudeville together.
Mm-hmm.
And new season started, so the first episode we streamed it last night.
Oh, nice!
It's awesome. So if you haven't watched it, it's quirky, but quirky's good.
Yeah, I liked season 1. I didn't know the next season came out. I'll have to let the lady know. Let's go. That's awesome.
You got to go for it. It's a good it's a good sit down with significant other and some popcorn or some whatever, some good diet food for those of you that are in that space right now. But it's good stuff. So Joy Behar, speaking of quirky, and I mentioned before the break that I need to start calling her Joy Behar, because everything that comes out of her mouth is laughable. Almost to the point of, there are some people that they're such a caricature that it's almost unfair to laugh because it's such low-hanging fruit, and she's kind of one of those folks. So a trait of the cohort is consistently making ludicrous statements while simultaneously believing that you're the smartest person in the room, and that's her. That's her. She recently commented on The View, and we're gonna listen to the words of her own mouth here in a moment. She recently commented on The View that, quote, the economy is booming. So here's the reality. Her economy is booming because, somewhat inexplicably, ABC pays her $7 million a year. Plus, like a $500K bonus. I don't know what the qualifier is for that. I'm sure it's not like, the NFL. If you make a certain number of tackles, I don't think she's tackling anybody. But and her net worth is estimated to be $30 million. She's actually the last remaining original member of that cast. That's another mind-blowing thing. All the people that have been on that show, and she's the last remaining member. So, Chris, we're gonna play cut one, and we're gonna hear what Joy had to say about the economy.
Let me just say something about Joe Biden. According to what I'm observing, the economy is booming.
Yeah.
Inflation is down. The stock market is doing well. People are having an easier time putting bread on the table, etc. He doesn't seem to be getting the credit for that. Only 41% approval. Is it because they think he's old? Because I don't see anything else they can point to with him particularly.
What's the question for Democrats?
I don't see anything else they can point to. Now, here, notice that the first words out of her mouth, and this was the key, the first words out of her mouth were, according to what I'm observing. Oh, according to what I don't know what bubble she's in. I think I have a pretty good idea. I think it's a $7 million a year bubble. And by the way, I have no problem with the money. I am a committed capitalist, and I have no problem whatsoever with the number of zeros in her net worth. None at all. If someone believes she's worth that much, then, good on them. However, there's a high degree of, just either disingenuousness rather, or just plain dissociative disorder, according to what she's observing. So for her, like all members of the cohort, what's real to her is what's real. Whatever is real to her, whatever in her milieu and her experience, whatever is real in that space, that's what's real. She's, as they say, she's sharing her truth. But the problem is you don't get to have a personal truth. It's not like a personal pan pizza. You get your own truth. The truth, capital T, has its substance outside the realm of your opinions and your personal experiences. And if we're really going to get into it, and you can embrace this or not, this is what I believe. I believe that the truth is neither an opinion or a concept, that the truth is a person named Jesus, who is the truth. But that's a discussion for another day. You didn't tune in for church, you tuned in for the drive. So what's true is true, whether you believe / accept it or not. What's true is true. It doesn't matter if you believe it. And that's the tricky issue with respect to reality and unreality. Because one critical element of embracing unreality as the lens through which you view life is that you must willingly abandon objective and accurate perspective. You got to throw that out the window and just decide that you're going to live with the March Hare and the Mad Hatter. You have to renounce your citizenship in the land of reality in exchange for the land of seems like, feels like, and they say. Again, well, according to what I'm observing, well, it seems to me, it feels like, well, they say, here's what I want to know. Who are they and why in the world is anybody listening to them? So the key aspect of the principle of objective perspective is that your subjective interpretation of your life experiences is not necessarily reality. And that's a bitter pill for us to swallow sometimes, because that's an easy thing for any of us to slip into, that what we've experienced is what is. Here's the reality. Your experiences and or your interpretation of them, that's the bigger issue. Your experiences can lie to you profusely. We experience all sorts of things in life, especially growing up, that they were not reality. They were not normal. Our experiences, and again, more specifically, our interpretations of them, what we told ourselves that thing meant, those things can lie to us. So as a result, the things we establish as our normal often aren't normal at all. That's the snare of viewing and framing life through the lens of our own limited experience. That's the problem with, well, according to what I'm observing. See, the stories we tell ourselves are largely works of fiction. But here's the thing. Clear thinkers understand that their experiences don't constitute a universal reality. That the things I've experienced, I can't extrapolate them out into some sort of universal expectation that everyone else is required to conform to. That's folly. That's foolishness. So it's important for us as clear thinkers to understand the distinctions between perspective and presumption. Perspective is the lens of objective clarity, while presumption is the lowest and least reliable form of information. And again, that's one of the characteristics of the unreality cohort, that the presupposition to everything is presumption at some level. And it doesn't matter which hobby horse you choose to ride, whether it's, climate change or police brutality or just pick one. There's presumption at the foundation of it. And either you buy into the presumption, in spite of the fact that presumption is the lowest and least reliable form of information, or you don't. And if you question it nowadays, it's been criminalized. Dissent has been criminalized. So that's one of the things that I wanted to talk about today. Just Joy Behar. It's always a joy to see what's on her mind and kind of get in tune with the mindset of that milieu. So you're listening to The Drive. Dez Dickerson in for Brian Wilson, who's recovering fabulously from his medical procedure today. And when we come back, we got a caller, and we're going to talk to Larry in Clarksville, and we will be right back.
It's 3:30. I'm Mac Morey with your top stories. 84 degrees right now in Nashville, and keeping track of those storms as they roll through. They're going to come in two waves. One right now, one later tonight. And looking at that radar, it's the southern portion of the state that's really feeling a lot of that right now, passing through Lawrenceburg and Pulaski and a little south of Lewisburg and Mount Pleasant is where really the strong portions of that. But you look at Nashville, Clarksville, and a lot of the mid-state Lebanon, that rain is still going to be coming through. But as far as heavy winds and a little bit of circulation in some of those cells, it's going to be in the southern portions of the state and north portions of Alabama. Traffic and weather coming up in a few minutes. And let me give you those severe thunderstorm watches as well that are in Tennessee until 8 o'clock. Bedford, Giles, Lewis, Murray, Wayne, Coffee, Hardin, Lincoln, Moore, Franklin, Lawrence, Marshall, and Perry counties. Again, severe thunderstorm watch until 8 p.m. Traffic, weather coming up in a few minutes. Breaking news, the state of Tennessee now being sued by a group of organizations in Memphis. They allege that the redistricting plans that went into effect last year are, quote, intentionally discriminatory against black voters and other voters of color. Damon Hewitt, director of the Education Project, the NAACP Legal Defense and Education Fund, spoke on the lawsuit.
The play that we're seeing, the political play to mask and partisanship, to defiantly do whatever the other side thinks they can to ignore, to suppress the political voice and engagement of the black community, that's happening all over the country. And so this is a knife fight. You have to fight it out, duke it out. Case by case, state by state, map by map.
The lawsuit also claims that there was a lack of transparency during the redistricting process in the state. It says if the plans remain in place, votes by people of color will continue to, quote, be diluted due to selective redistricting. In Florida, their Governor Ron DeSantis suspended a local state attorney for being soft on crime. Derek Dennis.
Florida Republican governor and presidential candidate Ron DeSantis taking aim at Orlando State's attorney Monique Worrell, a black Democrat, suspending her over criticism her office didn't do more to keep an offender behind bars. DeSantis calling Worrell's administration
clearly and fundamentally derelict, so as to constitute both neglect of duty and incompetence.
The offender in question, now a suspect in the shooting of two Orlando police officers last week. But Worrell says DeSantis was just looking for any reason to target her, so she's looking to take legal action.
And that is the latest news. Weather and traffic next. I'm Mac Morey, WTN News.
Yeah, getting you home quicker. Super Talk 99.7 WTN, Dez Dickerson in for Brian Wilson today. And we're going to get to Larry in Clarksville here in a minute. I wanted to mention that in the previous segment, the thing that really set Joy Behar off was there's a New York Times Siena poll that says that and this was in the New York Times, by the way. This wasn't like Breitbart or something. That says that it's a dead heat between Trump and Biden at this moment. Now, it's really early. I don't even start paying attention to polls. If I ever do at all, I don't do it this early. But that was the thing that set her off. Because, again, this whole reality-unreality thing, it's upsetting when reality intrudes on that unreality. And they have to try to recreate a scenario that's more palatable. And in that world, in that scenario, it's a wonderful economy. And Biden is awesome, and everybody's happy, and they got plenty of food on their table. Some people might be trying to eat their table because they're hungry, but So let's see what Larry in Clarksville has to say. Larry, how you doing today?
Brother Dez, thank you, sir, for taking my call. And we have spoken before.
Yes, we have, and thanks for calling in.
Well, and salute, from an old Cold War Air Force sergeant for a belated happy birthday to you, sir.
Well, I appreciate that. Another time around the sun here.
Well, yes, sir. And listen, it beats the alternative.
Yes, it does. On the right side of the dirt, it's a good day.
It's a good day. And you were speaking about the truth. And one of the things that I just dearly love about you and WTN is that you speak the truth, whether it's for or against whoever, whatever party you guys speak the truth.
Well, that's the goal. That's the mission.
I didn't go to college until I was 43.
Well, good.
But I was paying for it, so I paid attention. But I got told by one of my professors that the truth is only what you believe it to be. And I said, well, you're telling me that 2 + 2 is not 4. And he said, that's just because that's only, what you were taught.
See, to them, it's a construct.
Dez, I got to buy some duct tape, brother.
Oh, I think we lost him. But, definitely get the gist of where he's going. And that, in a nutshell, this whole issue of reality versus unreality, that's what it looks like. When you can be told, by the way, an institution of higher learning that's asking for big dollars to try to, turn your mind into mush. And they can tell you that, 2 + 2 is only 4 because that's what they told you. No, it's 4 because that's what it is. Because, math is objective and your subjective opinion has nothing to do with it. It is what it is. So we're going to pivot. John Kerry, who by the way, is worth $200 million plus a billionaire by marriage, and is, I don't know if you knew this or not, he's the special presidential envoy for climate. Now, I don't know what on earth that means, but he is that. And, maybe you knew that, and maybe you cared, maybe you didn't. So John Kerry also owns 6 homes, 2 yachts, 12 cars, and a private jet. They left out the partridge in a pear tree. And again, I don't have any problem with wealth. I don't have any problem with that, with any of it. I'd love to have a private jet as a practical matter, just to avoid everything from traffic to lines to security checks to, all of it. I would love to. I mean, flying private versus, flying commercial is night and day. You'd have to be out of your mind to choose to fly commercial if you can fly private. So I don't have a problem with that. I do, however, have a problem with his dissociative and hypocritical climate fascism. I do have a problem with that because John Kerry wants you to make changes to save the planet, but him, not so much. See, that I have a problem with. He laments that the world can't tackle climate change without first addressing the agriculture sector's emissions. Yes, that's right. The only hope for planet Earth is if we get the farmers' emissions under control. And allegedly, it's 33% of all emissions globally. Only 10% of that, however, coming from the United States. And what we're measuring, is there any validity to that measure, those metrics for determining how and what is shaping the climate in which we live and the future of it? I'm always amused by the fact that the same people who construct the models that we use to determine whether or not it's going to rain Saturday are telling us what's going to happen 30 years from now. That's just odd to me. But anyway, I guess I'm just funny that way. So 33% of all emissions globally. He's concerned. We got to do something about that. So never mind that in the first 18 months of the Biden presidency, Kerry's private jet travel burned 325 metric tons of carbon. Again, if you're a believer in those things. 325 metric tons. So pay no attention to the billionaire behind the curtain. He wants to do something to reduce the ag industry's greenhouse gas emissions. That's the mission he's on. So I'm going to read a little bit from a Fox article. Special presidential envoy for climate, John Kerry. I wonder if they say that before he enters a room. Special presidential envoy for climate, John Kerry. Kind of like, Muhammad Ali used to have this dude that carried around his championship belt. Dude's name was Boondini Brown. And he would walk 20 feet ahead of the champ and say, the greatest of all times. I wonder if Kerry does that. Anyway, he should. If he doesn't, he should. So John Kerry warned Wednesday that the world can't tackle climate change without first addressing the agriculture sector's emissions. Kerry lamented that agriculture production alone creates 33% of the world's total greenhouse gas emissions, arguing that reducing those emissions must be front and center in the quest to defeat global warming. During remarks, last Wednesday at the Department of Agriculture's AIM for Climate Summit. The former Secretary of State also touted so-called climate smart agriculture as a potential solution. A lot of people have no clue that agriculture contributes about 33% of all the emissions of the world, he said during his keynote address. We can't get to net zero, so, they're telling us that we have to get to net zero. I don't know. I think you could just stop right there. We can't get to net zero. Period, full stop. Thank you very much. Elvis has left the building. We can't get to net zero. We don't get this job done unless agriculture is front and center. Well, I will say this. We can't get to net zero without living in caves. Let's just put it that way. So all of us understand here the depths of this mission. Well, I don't know if everybody agrees with that. And see, that's okay. See, we're free to believe or not believe. We're free to agree or not agree. And with respect to climate change, it's the fascism of it. There's consensus, shut up and sit down. That's the problem. I mean, personally, I believe in climate change under its original name, weather. It was called weather. Weather changes. Weather does stuff. Weather's doing stuff today. So at the same time, though, he's only recently copped to owning a jet, and whether or not that is in conflict with the strong positions he's taking in his role as climate envoy. So we're going to talk about that a little bit more after the break. Dez Dickerson in for Brian Wilson, Super Talk 99.7 WTN. You're listening to The Drive, and we will be right back.
A Roth IRA versus a traditional IRA. Which one should we do? A lot of people struggle over this particular decision. And I'll just give you a couple tools to figure out what might be better for you. Think about it this way. Let's say if I had $1,000 that I was thinking about investing, that was income, $1,000 of income. With an IRA, let's say that you're in a 30% tax bracket. Let's say there is such a thing. And you want to put this money in an IRA. You're going to save $300 in taxes. Now, if you go post-tax with like a Roth IRA, this is how much goes into the Roth IRA. Now, let's say that later on down the road, we have this money and it didn't grow at all, just to keep the math really simple. And let's say that at some point in the future, you're in a lower tax bracket, because the way our tax system works is that your first income is taxed at a really low rate, and then you get up into higher rates, 10%, 12%, 22%, and so on and so forth. It gets higher. If you're earning income and you're at that particular tax rate up there, you might want to avoid that tax rate right now and take the income at a later point in time when you're in a lower average tax rate. Now let's say that you're in a 10% bracket down here when you pull the money. How much are you going to pay in taxes? 10% of $1,000 is $100. How much do you get to spend? $900. Well, even though I didn't have growth, I had growth because of the difference between my tax rate here and here. And that's the idea. That's one of the things that we look at. We look at Social Security taxation, income taxation, and a lot of factors that might drive you in a higher or lower brackets in the future. If you want to learn more about our approach to investing and financial planning, go to paulwinkler.com and set up a free 15-minute phone call or call 615-851-1950.
A man suspected of threatening the president dead after an FBI raid. Sanctuary cities need help with the influx of migrants crossing the border, and the writers' strike in Hollywood goes on. That and more coming up at 4. Super Talk 99.7 WTN.
I'm going to talk about the guy that was issuing the threats because he made a critical error. I'm just saying. We're up against a hard break, but I do want to. We got Jim from Murfreesboro on hold, wants to weigh in on the John Kerry thing. Jim, come on aboard. What do you have for us?
Okay. Well, I guess the first part was earlier caller talking about the professor explaining that 2 plus 2 is just what they've been taught.
Mm-hmm.
I'm pretty sure when it comes to his paycheck, he's pretty adamant about 2 plus 2 equaling 4.
Well, I'll bet you his math is impeccable when it comes to his check.
Yes, sir. And then with John Kerry about agricultural emissions, I don't know, this is just a thought on my end. Would that actually reduce world food and therefore maybe reduce world population? I mean, is that maybe kind of something they're shooting for?
I don't think they think things
Not out
through.
loud.
Well, it could be. I mean, you never know what the agenda may be, although they telegraph it pretty well. They think that they're being really slick because, again, they think they're the smartest people in the room. But so many times it's so transparent. It's like when a little kid comes up and wants to play hide and seek and they they go in the corner where you can still see them. It's like, you're right there. I can see you. But John Kerry, like all of the cohort with respect to the climate change issue, it's more a virtue signaling issue than anything. And the button they try to push is we have to do something because people are going to die. He says, I refuse to call it climate change anymore. It's not change. It's a crisis. We're facing record malnutrition at a time when agriculture, more than any other sector, is suffering from the impacts of the climate crisis. I tell you what, there's a thing called the Benedict Society. It's a kid's series, but it's really an adult thing. You can stream it, and it deals with this topic in a way that's very, very comical, but very, very revealing. Because if you just tell people there's a crisis, you can get away with it. Super Talk 99.7 WTN. Dez Dickerson in for Brian Wilson. We're going to take a break. We will be back.
It's 4:01. I'm Mac Maury with your top stories. 83 degrees, and those storms are right now circulating through Middle Tennessee. We've got Lawrence and Pulaski County who have already received some very harsh winds, now just rain. You talk about Murfreesboro, Columbia, and right here in Nashville experiencing some of that rain and none of that severe weather, but there is another wave of storms coming tonight. Severe thunderstorm watch right now in effect until 8 p.m. in a few counties in Tennessee: Bedford, Giles, Lewis, Murray, Wayne, Coffee, Hardin, Lincoln, Moore, Franklin, Lawrence, Marshall, and Perry counties. We'll keep you updated with all the need to know on the sky, complete weather and traffic in 5 minutes. President Biden heading to Utah tonight before his arrival. A man suspected of threatening to kill the president has died in an FBI raid. Alex Stone.
On Monday, Craig Robertson of Provo, Utah, was allegedly posting his desires to kill the president during a presidential visit to Utah this week. Robertson had allegedly been posting numerous threats against the president and other prominent figures, including California Governor Gavin Newsom and those who were prosecuting President Trump. In some postings, he challenged the FBI to knock on his door and to come get him. That's exactly what an FBI team did on Wednesday morning. In the process, Robertson was shot and killed by federal agents, according to multiple sources. He was charged with 3 counts, including making threats against the president.
The FBI made a statement today saying that they're reviewing an agent-involved shooting that happened at 6 o'clock this morning. Over in New York City, the mayor is once again pleading for federal help to deal with the influx of migrants in the city. Here's Derek Dennis.
The migrant crisis in New York City taking a staggering toll, says Mayor Eric Adams.
Almost 100,000 men, women, and children have asked for a place to stay. That's almost the population of Albany, New York.
The mayor says the city has footed almost the entire bill ever since busloads of migrants started arriving from the southern border earlier this year. He says all without any significant state or federal help. The ongoing price tag, according to the mayor, nearly $5 billion this fiscal year.
Right now in Murfreesboro police posted on social media today. They were warning of a post that was gaining some traction online that claimed that a woman had been kidnapped or almost been kidnapped, in the daylight. That post goes into detail on 2 men that tried to kidnap this 20-year-old woman. And police said they've not seen any validity to that post and said, quote, if this were true, the police department would have already notified the public, end quote. And not the kind of anniversary you want to celebrate. The writer's strike, officially 100 days old as of today, and there's no end in sight, according to Jason Nathanson.
It's a shameful anniversary, says Chris Kaiser and David Goodman, co-chairs of the Writers Guild Negotiating Committee, and it appears there's no end in sight. A brief glimmer of hope last week when the writers and studio reps met for the first time since before the strike started, but talks are not on again.
I'm very hopeful for end in sight if it's fair.
John Hoffman is the co-creator of Only Murders in the Building. He tells me the 100-day anniversary.
I don't want to say that I expected it, but I don't find it too unexpected either.
His show up for a bunch of Emmys, which might be moved from September to next year because of the strikes.
And that is the latest news. Traffic and weather on the way. I'm Mac Maury, WTN News.
All right. Brian's not doing the driving today. You got Dez Dickerson with you on Super Talk 99.7 today as Mr. Wilson recovers. So, I want to draw our attention to a cautionary tale, a teachable moment here. This gentleman who has shuffled off this mortal coil after making threats against the life of the president, and then responding to the FBI unwisely. There are 4 words you should never use in responding to the FBI. Come and get me. You don't want to use those. You don't want to use those. I think he watched too many old, what was it, The Untouchables, the old show. I think he watched too many old gangster movies. Come and get me, copper. Well, see, they can't yell cut when the FBI kicks your door down and kind of lets the air out of you. But here's the thing, though. This is what occurred to me. I mean, you have to deal with those kinds of threats. That's the kind of stuff the FBI actually should be doing. But, I remember several years ago when, Donald Trump was in office and Snoop Dogg actually did a video where he depicted shooting Donald Trump. Now, I don't recall anybody kicking my man's door down and busting a cap in him. So, some types of threats I think are taken more seriously than others. But anyway, that's just something that I think about. I think about these things. So we have Susie in Bellevue holding. Thank you so much for being patient. Susie, come on board and tell us what you got for us today.
Okay. First of all, if I may, I want to start off by saying I don't think Joe Biden's going to be on the ticket. And there's one Democratic governor that I really fear the most, and it's not the airhead from California. And I will not mention that governor's name because I don't want to give him any ideas. But I'm talking about the polls. There's the poll, the national poll, the primary poll, and then there's this other poll that polls the swing states, not a primary or anything like that. And about 3 months, and I don't have a computer, so you're talking to a dinosaur. But anyway, about 3 months ago, they did a poll that had President Trump and whoever else they put against him. Maybe it was Biden, I don't know, between Arizona, Nevada, and I believe Wisconsin. And he lost it. He didn't come up in any of those. He was not triumphant. Now, there was another poll, even on Newsmax, and they are total suck-ups to, well, anyway. And the lady, they were running polls in the swing states, and Trump never won. And I am begging Dan Mandis, Brian Wilson, and you, and everybody in between, that we need to start focusing on the swing states. And I'm talking Georgia, Pennsylvania, all these states that, that are problematic. And I think we've got to be careful about that. And I'm concerned. And let me ask you, maybe you can tell me of any of you may already have record of it, so educate me on that, because like I said, I'm a dinosaur, no computer.
Well, and that may not be a bad thing at times. So, Susie, thanks for calling in, and thanks for your input. So, a couple of things. Number one, and this is almost anecdotal, but since you mentioned the swing states and a couple of states in particular, my concern for a while over the course of the last 2.5 years, with the massive influx of folks moving to this area, this part of the country, from swing states, from places like Pennsylvania, Georgia, et cetera, that a lot of folks have fled places where their votes are critical. So I don't know. It's anecdotal. I don't know that there's enough shift for it to make a significant difference, but it can't be helping. So that's one factor I just wanted to mention, just sort of as a side note. I do think this, that as I mentioned earlier, I don't really put a whole lot of stock in polls, period. As we've seen in the last few presidential cycles specifically, they've been wildly off in many cases. And a poll is only as good as, the internals of the poll and so on. And you can make a poll say whatever you want it to say based on how honest, dishonest, disingenuous you might be with how you sample and who you oversample and all those kinds of things at any stage of the game. But for me, and this is just my opinion, I think it's way too early to be putting too much stock in polling because historically, these things can shift wildly, and they can shift certainly the closer you get to election day, et cetera. Of course, we don't have election day anymore. With early voting, we've got like election month, election quarter, whatever. So I will say this, there are going to be states where the races are extremely close. Not just because they're, what we traditionally call swing states, but because, we also have issues with respect to the vote counting. And I'm sorry, I'm saying it and I'm saying it out loud. I'm not going to stutter. I happen to be like home and bedridden with COVID during the 2020, the days that followed. And I was fascinated to watch in all these different, local cities and counties and municipalities, town hall meetings and inquiries. And there were so many hearings where they were talking about, people were testifying about irregularities. You and I both have seen with our own eyes film of people rolling carts of votes in. Come on, you can't tell me. This is another one of those things. Another one of those reality, unreality things. You can't tell me that there weren't shenanigans. I'm sorry, you can't tell me. So my concern is this, that if there have not been measures taken by those with the wherewithal to do so, in the places where the vote is most critical, then Stalin will be proven right once again. It's not a matter of who casts the votes. It's a matter of who counts the votes. So much more so than the polling, much more so than, and yes, I do agree that in certain states that we call swing states, traditionally it's those margins that make the difference nationally. But it's not going to matter if we don't get a handle on, some of the early voting and the ballot harvesting and some of this other nonsense. So here's what we're going to do. We're going to pivot back. Speaking of swing, we're going to swing back to John Kerry here after the break. Super Talk 99.7 WTN. You can call in 615-737-9986. Love to talk to you. Love to have you weigh in, hear what you're thinking. But like I said, we're covering a lot of ground here on the drive today. Brian's out, Dez in for Brian today, and we'll be right back.
Tracking storms today and into early tomorrow morning as the end of wave 1 of 2 subsides here in the mid-state, and some classified documents updates as far as that case is concerned with the former President Donald Trump, plus some money news, what happened today on Wall Street. That and more, 4:30 Super Talk 99.7 WTN.
Yes, the real Fleetwood Mac. Back when they had 3 guitar players. Yep. Long before any Southern rock band had 3 guitar players, Fleetwood Mac did. Classic riff. I mean, that's just one of the most classic riffs in rock and roll history. But anyway, I could go on about it. So, Super Talk 99.7 WTN, Dez Dickerson in for Brian Wilson today. And we've been talking about a few different things, but we've kind of been zeroing in on some climate change things and John Kerry's latest crusade. I'll tell you what, we got a call. We got Patrick in Clarksville who wants to talk about climate change. So let's bring Patrick on board. Patrick, what do you got for us?
First off, I want to say that I always enjoy it when you're on the radio.
Oh, thank you.
And now to my point. Scripture says in Genesis 8:22, as long as the earth endures, seed time and harvest, cold and heat, summer and winter, day and night will not cease. So that tells the earth that weather cycle. And then as far as these nut job climate change people, if you reduce carbon emissions and carbon footprint, then plants starve. What do plants do? Plants give out oxygen.
Absolutely.
And then you lose crops and all that, too. You starve the people out.
Amen.
That's basic biology.
At the end of the day, if you're intellectually honest and you look at biblical principle versus proven science always corroborates biblical principle. But if you're disingenuous, then again, it's like polling. You can make it say whatever you want to say. So here's my thing with respect to so-called man-made, and we got to talk about man-made climate change. At the end of the day, you can believe what you want to believe. I have a problem when you start gutting the economy in order to serve an agenda that you believe in and put stock in, but other people don't get to vote. Other people don't have a say in the matter. I'm not down with that. I'm not down with you putting me in a cave and sending me back to the Stone Age because of your climate concerns. You don't get to make those decisions for all of us. Personally, I put stock in what our last caller just had to say. I believe that the God who was enough God, and we're not, to be the one to conceive and create, also had the forethought to deal with every contingency, including knuckle-headed people doing dumb things that may undermine his creation. I really think that if God is God, he's that much God that he knows much more than we do. And one thing, a word you never hear uttered in the throne room of Almighty God is, oops, didn't think of that one. So at any rate, continuing on with John Kerry. So, he, on the one hand, is on this crusade and has been. He's because this is one of those pet issues for the cohort. There's big virtue signaling points. It's kind of like fantasy football. Instead of fantasy football points, it's virtue signaling points. So on the one hand, he wants to do something to reduce the ag industry's greenhouse gas emissions at all costs because people are dying, for crying out loud. But at the same time, he's only recently copped to owning a jet, sort of. So here's an article from Town Hall. The headline is, in hindsight, climate czar John Kerry finally admits his family owns a private jet. Now, one of the things he does, and I don't want to get too far ahead of myself, but one of the things he does is he plays the, oh, that's my wife's money game. Because, again, his wife is a billionaire, an heiress. And I think what it is she married a Heinz before she married Kerry. So she has billions from being married to a Heinz. My oldest son worked for Kraft Heinz at one point, by the way. Just kind of was in charge of like a $750 million spend, something crazy like that. But so his wife is a billionaire. Now, I don't know about you, but my mindset is not such that if my wife is sitting on $1 billion, my mindset is not, well, that's my wife's money. That's not my money. Come on, man. What turnip truck do you think we just fell off of? So John Kerry finally remembered that he had a private jet. It's a sticking point because it's become a source of mockery, given that he's Joe Biden's climate czar. On Biden's European trip, Kerry spent part with the president lecturing the British about green energy, which our cousins across the pond poorly received. He's not the only one, but it's common to see that the most vociferous global warming activists all happen to travel by private planes, taking their carbon footprint sky high. I mean, the number of private aircraft at like Davos, for example, crazy. So nothing wrong with private jets if you can afford them. I've already said I want an Embraer myself. I'm just saying. But you're in no position to lecture us about how we live our lives if the topic is carbon emissions. Kerry fell into that trap at a congressional hearing. Things got interesting when he testified that he didn't own a private jet, but it belonged to his family. I don't own it, but it's something many will rightfully see as a distinction without a difference. In the first 18 months of the Biden presidency, Kerry's private jet exploits burned 325 metric tons of carbon, as we said earlier. New York Post Douglas Murray quipped, Kerry remembered that his family owned a private aircraft in hindsight. It was one of the many instances when Kerry got torched by congressional Republicans who, like many, can figure out what he does for the United States. So, again, well, it's not my plane, it's my family's plane. Well, but I could say, well, that's not my car, it's my family's car. I rode here in it, and I drive it, my wife drives it, we drive our kids in it, but that's not my car. Well, that's ludicrous. But somehow, again, because they feel they're the smartest people in the world, they think they can just, sell us that Huck Finn story and we're just going to believe it. But see, all of this is a classic case study in the pathology of the cohort where actual privilege is concerned. Because, see, one of the things they love to do is talk about this kind of privilege and that kind of privilege and different colors of privilege and whatever. But farmers, food producers, and consumers have to dig deeper and bleed more to save the planet, while Kerry has plenty of your money to burn through to prevent him from having to use his own. And he doesn't have a plane, by the way. Super Talk 99.7 WTN, Dez Dickerson with you. We'll be right back.
.430, I'm Mac Morey with your top story. 79 degrees right now and some heavy rain around the mid-state. Looks like that first wave of strong storms has passed, though, for this area of Middle Tennessee. The worst of round one is going through near Tullahoma right now, and we got a severe thunderstorm watch until 8 o'clock in Bedford, Giles, Lewis, Murray, Wayne, Coffee, Hardin, Lincoln, Moore, Franklin, Lawrence, Marshall, and Perry counties. And wave number 2 of possible severe storms is expected after midnight tonight. Full weather forecast, latest traffic report on the way in 5 minutes. The latest in the classified documents case has Donald Trump's attorneys asking the judge to allow their client to review the evidence at the scene of the alleged crime. Steve Portnoy.
The case is about the way the former president stored classified documents at Mar-a-Lago and the lengths prosecutors say he went to keep them there. Now, lawyers for Donald Trump argue it would be reasonable and appropriate for the documents to be brought back to his Florida residence so he can prepare for the trial there. The defense attorneys say they want to reestablish the type of secure facility that existed at Mar-a-Lago during Trump's presidency. Special counsel Jack Smith opposes the idea.
Now over to the money news. Daria Albinger walks us through Wall Street.
Stocks tumbled ahead of two important inflation reports. The Dow plunged 191 points. The Nasdaq gave up 162 and the S&P fell 32. Investors are jittery ahead of Thursday's Consumer Price Index and Friday's Producer Price Index, which reflect how much more we're paying on the consumer end in the case of the PPI. Wholesale levels month to month and year over year. Earnings season rolls on. Among the reports after the close, one from the Walt Disney Company, the parent company of ABC News. Numbers just shy of analysts' expectations. CEO Bob Iger says he's confident in the company's long-term trajectory. Waves of severe thunderstorms across the country in the first half of the year led to a record $34 billion in insured losses. Reinsurer Swiss Re Group says damage from hail, lightning, and strong rain here in the U.S. accounted for almost 3/4 of the $50 billion in global catastrophic damages so far this year.
And that is the latest news, traffic, and weather on the way. I'm Mac Morey, WTN News.
All right. Dez Dickerson, your substitute driver on the drive today. And one of my favorite bands. I'm not going to tell you who they are. You're going to have to Shazam it. So here's some inside baseball about the whole radio thing. You know, in the transitions between shows, and isn't it weird how all of a sudden the word transition feels awkward? But I digress. In the transitions between shows, you know, you're kind of coming in and out of the studio, kind of in this crazy, you know, Chinese fire drill. Another thing you can't say anymore, I'm sure. And but in the process, you know, and it's a quick changeover. But in the process, you know, you have conversations or whatever. So I was coming in as Matt was leaving for the day, and we just had a quick conversation about you know, the difference between, you know, doing a 3-hour slot and doing drive times. My first time doing drive time, and it's awesome. You know, the difference between 3 hours and 4 hours of radio is significant. And it's kind of like, you know, in the NFL, a lot of times rookies, they hit what they call the rookie wall because they've never had that long a stretch of time where they've had to, you know, play football and keep their bodies tuned up and in shape and able to function. So there's a point during the season where they just hit the wall. Well, you know, I'm not going to hit the rookie wall today. You know, we're going to cruise right through, and I'm feeling good. You know, I'm going to go 15 rounds, and I'm feeling good. So we're going to, in just a second here, we're going to pivot to Robert, who's on hold. And I want to mention, you can call in 615-737-9986. There's also the super text line. Again, I'm inside baseball. I'm going to be really honest. Everybody else watches the super text line while they're on air. I don't, because I get distracted. So what I am going to do, though, is I'm going to deputize Chris. Chris, if you see any good text messages, let a brother know, and we'll talk about it on air. But I don't watch it because it distracts me. So let's go to Robert. Robert's on hold. Robert, what do you got for us?
Hey, Dez, I just wanted to comment on your last thing about climate and how God had a plan and everything. If you read the Bible, God said it's going to get bad. It's not going to get better. So that's just my comment on that. And, you know, people want to pray and it's going to get better and this and that. But according to the Bible, it's going to get worse. It's going to get a lot worse. It's not going to get better. So that's just my comment.
Yeah, that is true. There's tribulation. There's all that stuff. Now, there's a distinction, though, and thanks for your call, Robert. There's a distinction between choice and consequence and kind of stepping on the rake and the things that we do and things that we want to attribute this almost, you know, deity-like importance, authority, and capacity to ourselves, you know, regarding that we have the power to change the climate. I mean, on its face, that's just megalomaniacal. You know, but you think about it, there are certain themes that have kind of run through, you know, sci-fi and everything over the ages, and that's one of them. You know, because here's the thing, and I don't want to get too deep into some sort of Freudian Kool-Aid, but, you know, people deal with feelings of powerlessness by creating fantastical stories in which they are powerful. So, you know, I'm going to leave that where it is right now, but that's one of those things that happens. So, you know what? We got another call. Let's go to Michael. I think Michael, is this north of Chattanooga? Come on board, Michael. What do you have for us?
Hey, man. How you doing, Dez?
I'm doing well. How are you?
Everybody says that. Hey, you're talking about you can't do the jive anymore and all that. I broke C1 and C2, so I'm fused from the skull to C3. So I feel you, man.
Man, it's it's a change. It's different.
Well, I had to have two halos. The first one they put on there, and to watch it. workers' comp insurance. Let's watch it. Let's see what's going to happen. And surgeon saying, I know what's going to happen. We got to fix it. So
he's going to be paralyzed. That's what's going to happen.
Yeah, because broke same thing Christopher Reeve broke when it paralyzed him. Yeah.
Wow.
So I'm very, I can walk and talk and do stuff, So I'm very, very blessed.
Oh, that's awesome.
But I still got hurt and all that goes along with it. But, man, I love you. I love you doing stuff. I'm glad they got you in there because you do a very good show.
Well, thank you.
I enjoy, and there you are talking scripture. Preach on, brother. Preach on. Because, some people just ignore it. Some people think other stuff. So I know I'm rambling. We got to get back to you.
I appreciate you. And thanks for calling in. The thing is, I'm committed to one thing. I'm just here to do what I am. I'm not trying to or trying not to, because that would be inauthentic. And the thing I always stress is, look, this is America, land of freedom. You don't have to believe the same things I believe. You don't have to agree with me. Because if everybody thinks the same, nobody thinks. If you and I are identical, then one of us is unnecessary. So I say it all the time. Look, you're free to, you are free to believe, to not believe. You have the right to believe, to not believe. You have the right to be stupid, to remain stupid. You have the right to remain stupid, but anything you say can and will be held against you at some point. So I'm just going to be and do what I am, and I want to encourage you to do the same, because I believe that that's what clear thinkers do. We're not intimidated by what other people do or don't think, do or don't believe. It doesn't matter to us. We respect people, and that's the thing that's missing from our discourse now. It used to be some of my best friends were folks with whom I disagreed vehemently, ideologically and politically and otherwise, but we loved and respected one another as people. So we could have intense disagreements and, then go grab a pizza or something. So here's what we're going to do. Well, you know what? One of the things about doing talk radio, I was talking earlier about the whole the prep thing. There's the necessity of doing good and exhaustive show prep if you're going to do anything that's worth listening to. And that's the objective, is not just to do something that's worth listening to, but something that's compelling. So, if you're going to maximize the responsibility of being on the air, not phone it in, you have to put in the time. And it's easy to reduce this whole thing to the pursuit of just filling the time, like, running on a treadmill. But, you can run a whole lot of miles and go nowhere. So I'm going to talk more about this in a minute. We're going to take a break, and when we come back, I'm going to talk some more about this. But I really want to share some more about just the fire to do this and do it in such a way that I'm respecting you and hopefully, striking our thinking in some ways so that we A, kind of look at some things differently, but B, are inspired to go out and share the things that we're seeing differently. Because ultimately, everything we give away, we get to keep. And influence is our hope. And I don't think our hope is in legislation. I don't think our hope is in a number of things that we unfortunately have placed our hope in. It's you and you and you and you influencing those within your sphere of influence. That's our hope. That's the future. Super Talk 99.7 WTN, Dez Dickerson in for Brian Wilson. We'll be right back.
A Roth IRA versus a traditional IRA. Which one should we do? A lot of people struggle over this particular decision. And I'll just give you a couple tools to figure out what might be better for you. Think about it this way. Let's say if I had $1,000 that I was thinking about investing, that was income, $1,000 of income. With an IRA, let's say that you're in a 30% tax bracket. Let's say there is such a thing. And you want to put this money in an IRA. You're going to save $300 in taxes. Now, if you go post-tax with like a Roth IRA, this is how much goes into the Roth IRA. Now, let's say that later on down the road, we have this money and it didn't grow at all, just to keep the math really simple. And let's say that at some point in the future, you're in a lower tax bracket, because the way our tax system works is that your first income is taxed at a really low rate, and then you get up into higher rates, 10%, 12%, 22%, and so on and so forth. It gets higher. If you're earning income and you're at that particular tax rate up there, you might want to avoid that tax rate right now and take the income at a later point in time when you're in a lower average tax rate. Now let's say that you're in a 10% bracket down here when you pull the money. How much are you going to pay in taxes? 10% of $1,000 is $100. How much do you get to spend? $900. Well, even though I didn't have growth, I had growth because of the difference between my tax rate here and here. And that's the idea. That's one of the things that we look at. We look at Social Security taxation, income taxation, and a lot of factors that might drive you into higher or lower brackets in the future. If you want to learn more about our approach to investing and financial planning, go to paulwinkler.com and set up a free 15-minute phone call or call 615-851-1950.
A man suspected of threatening to kill President Biden, now dead after an FBI raid. A man facing charges after an attempted bank robbery. That's here in Music City. And plus some other crime in the state. Plus another controversy involving race in the popular reality TV show Big Brother. That and more at 5 o'clock. Super Talk 99.7 WTN.
I didn't know there was ever a controversy regarding race on Big Brother. The only controversy to me is it's a stupid show, but other than that. So, football season is here again. It's upon us. I actually get to see my team on TV tomorrow night. I bleed purple and gold. Mac is a Kansas City fan because Mac is actually, he's from there.
Heck yeah.
So what's your thought? What's your feeling about your team this year?
Man, I'm really excited. I mean, obviously coming off a Super Bowl win, so expectations are high. 5 straight AFC Championship appearances, so I want to get that back. I'm looking for the defense to make a step up. I mean, I could go in depth here,
sure.
But yeah, man, overall, I'm really, really excited. We've got a young team that's anchored by some star veterans, and I'm hoping that we can make another incredible run and keep this get this dynasty solidified in Kansas City.
I'd be into that. I mean, I got to admit, like my number 2 team, kind of my backup team, if the Vikings aren't doing well, is definitely the Chiefs, because you got to love Patrick Mahomes.
Heck yes.
But Chris, how about you? What's your Are you a fan, a super fan? I'll watch it if it's on. I mean,
I'm kind of in that camp. I used to be a much bigger fan. I grew up a Bears fan. My dad is from the Chicago area, so I grew up rooting for the Bears. And, me and you could go round and round. But I kind of lost, the NFL lost me a few years ago. I don't really know why, and I guess it's been lean times for the Bears anyway, so I haven't missed a whole lot over the last, handful of years. But I'm just a casual fan now. I get into it during playoff time. I'm more of a college football guy.
Oh, yeah. Well, see, that's one of the things about the Southeast. Back in the days when I was on the road, still living, up north, but spending a lot of time down here, I was amazed at the difference in the level of intensity about college football here as opposed to it was all about pro football. And everybody loved the Minnesota Golden Gophers. Weird name for a team, but I'm still a Gopher fan. Love PJ Fleck. But I get it. I mean, sometimes I think it would be probably better for my health if I was a casual fan. But
Same.
But I just love football. Period. I loved playing football until everybody else kept growing and I stopped. And so, the season is here. I can breathe again.
Woo.
Sunday doesn't seem like a vast wasteland,
Yes.
Well, church is over. Now what? Maybe the dog show's on. I don't know. But, hope springs eternal, right? Because everybody's 0-0. Everybody's contending for the Super Bowl until they're not. and then it all changes. But anyway, I hope your team does well, whoever you are out there, whatever team you follow. I know there's likely to be a lot of Titans fans listening. And I actually got a little thing about the Titans I'm going to go into a little bit later on. But in the meantime, Super Talk 99.7, WTN, we're coming up on a hard break. And I kind of, yes, I'm stretching right now. It's another one of those things. I'm still relatively new to this, but I'm learning. I'm stretching a little bit to get us to right there. We'll be right back.
5 o'clock, I'm Mac Maury with your top stories. Right now, 75 degrees in Nashville. Wave 1 of 2. Now going over East Tennessee. It has already passed the mid-state, and we're expecting wave 2 sometime after midnight tonight. Looking at severe thunderstorm watches, we've got one for portions of mid-state and southern Tennessee: Bedford, Giles, Lewis, Murray, Wayne, Coffee, Hardin, Lincoln, Moore, Franklin, Lawrence, Marshall, and Perry counties, all in a severe thunderstorm watch until 8 p.m. Stay updated with all things going on weather-wise right here on Super Talk 99.7 WTN. Complete weather forecast, latest traffic report upcoming in 5 minutes. President Biden heading to Utah tonight. Before his arrival, a man suspected of threatening to kill the president has died in an FBI raid. Alex Stone.
On Monday, Craig Robertson of Provo, Utah, was allegedly posting his desires to kill the president during a presidential visit to Utah this week. Robertson had allegedly been posting numerous threats against the president and other prominent figures, including California Governor Gavin Newsom and those who were prosecuting President Trump. In some postings, he challenged the FBI to knock on his door and to come get him. That's exactly what an FBI team did on Wednesday morning. In the process, Robertson was shot and killed by federal agents, according to multiple sources. He was charged with 3 counts, including making threats against the president.
And the FBI made a statement saying that they're reviewing right now an agent-involved shooting that happened at 6 o'clock this morning. Right now in Tennessee, a man is facing charges after an attempted bank robbery in Nashville. The 37-year-old man, Mario Armstrong, wrote a note saying that there was a bomb ready to blow up the building unless he received cash. Armstrong was spotted on surveillance footage and was later found after fleeing on Highway 70 South. He was less than 2 miles away from that bank. Federal charges are being considered in this case. And President Biden, some more news with him. He's restricting American companies from investing in certain high-tech businesses that are in China. Andy Field explains why.
The president's saying that U.S. business restrictions in China will help protect American national security by blocking China from using sensitive tech to improve its military, weapons, and intelligence. Mr. Biden's executive order preventing Americans from investing in Chinese artificial intelligence, computer chips, and quantum computing. The president making clear this is not about trade, but protecting U.S. national security.
And another controversy involving race and the popular reality TV show Big Brother. Here's Jason Nathanson.
Big Brother contestant Luke Valentine has been kicked off the show for using the N-word in conversation with several other house guests.
We're in the room now, dude.
He didn't call anyone the word, but he did use it. CBS saying that violates their code of conduct. This happened on the 24/7 live feed of the Big Brother house. Immediately after saying it, 2 contestants looked at him in disbelief and left the room, while Valentine apologized to another contestant in the room, Jared Fields, who is black.
I'm sorry.
You're off the legs.
Sorry, I gotta go.
Then the feed was cut. This is far from the first time in the show's 25 seasons that contestants have used racial slurs.
And that is the latest news, traffic and weather on the way. I'm Mac Maury, WTN News.
All right, Dez Dickerson in for Brian Wilson today. Brian recovering from a medical procedure earlier today. He'll be back in tomorrow, I understand. That's a trooper right there.
And I did get word from him just a little while ago that he is home and in recovery, and that it went just about as well as it possibly could go.
Oh, man, that's awesome.
So he's pleased with that. So it sounds like he's doing well.
That's awesome.
It's been a long day for him, though. He was there at 5:30 this morning at the hospital.
It's like they never do surgery at like 10 in the morning.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? It doesn't matter what it is. Oh, you need to be here at stupid o'clock in the morning, and then, you know, we're going to hurry up and wait. But
yeah, and I understood that's exactly what happened. He got there at 5, told him to be there at 5:30. I don't think he actually got in until about 7:30.
I'm sure.
You know.
It's like I don't know, I've had like 3 or 4 surgeries in the last couple of years. I've had enough surgery to last me for a lifetime. But, well, I'm glad to hear he's doing well. And, you know, I have said it before, but I'm going to say it again. I get the opportunity to stand on the shoulders of giants here at WTN. I'm still really new to this. I'm still a newbie. So it's been great to be able to kind of watch and learn and listen, and, you know, at the same time kind of jump in the deep end and swim. So, you know, I gotta back up for a second though. Do you think it's got to be a coincidence, right, that Joe Biden decides to like break bad against the Chinese today when like a third bank memo was released? And now it's up to like a total of $20 million that's documented payments to Biden family members. I'm sure it's just purely coincidental. There's no connection between those two things. Pay no attention to this man with his hand in your pocket. So one of the things I was mentioning earlier, one of the things about doing talk radio is the necessity of putting the time in show prep and whatnot. And it's easy to reduce the pursuit of having, you know, content and things to fill the time. It's easy to reduce it to just like running the treadmill and, you know, kind of going nowhere. Because there's a lot of transitory news. You know, there are a lot of options. I was having a conversation with my wife earlier today that there's like a billion different things that you could talk about, but you don't need to talk about everything. So it's kind of like the equivalent of the dog chasing a leaf across the yard. You know, we've got a dog like the size of a stegosaurus and he's just a puppy. He's just a year old, but every once in a while something will get his attention and he'll break into this gallop. And a dog that large shouldn't be able to do that. But, you know, dogs do that. They just do that. So some stories, on the other hand, aren't transitory. They have, like, immediate relevance and lasting significance. Not many, but some do. And I find that I'm drawn to those stories. I don't want to just, you know, kind of skip rocks across the pond. You know, I want to dive deep and I want to find sea monsters. You know, I want to go after things. But here's the thing, there's a time for skipping rocks. And that's one of the things I've been learning in sitting in this chair, that, you know, sometimes you just got to, you know, kind of take a breath and rest a beat and just, you know, skip some rocks. I get that. You know, but what it brings to mind is this. I never understood hacky sack. You know, I'm kind of people talk about type A personalities. I'm kind of a type AAA personality. I just heard my wife somewhere in the building go, amen. I'm a type AAA personality. And for that reason, I never understood hacky sack. Because it was like effort for no clear reason, no clear purpose, leading to nothing and going nowhere. I mean, can you win in hacky sack? Because I don't even really know how it works. All I just know is I've seen people standing around in a circle, like kind of kicking a bag up in the air. And I just was like, what is that? So I say all that to say this. I don't want to disrespect you, the audience, or waste your time by just playing hacky sack on the air. You know, And again, I understand there's a time, for binging every episode of Breaking Bad on Netflix, or, playing a whole season of Madden on the Xbox or whatever. I get that. See, actually, the priceless thing about working hard is the joy it brings when you get to take a day off. So I get that. Working hard and then being able to take a break and just watch something for no other reason other than you can. I get that. The priceless thing about hard work is the joy that it brings when you get to take the time off. But, I love a good cookie, but it makes a poor diet. There's something about, like just a good thick steak. I love the splash stories, but I'm out to track the trajectory of the times and the seasons we're in as much as possible to kind of connect the dots and link things together. And that's why, for me, everybody that pursues anything has their heroes. They have the people that are they're kind of the touchstones for them, the people that inspired them, the people that are the reason that they do what they did. It was definitely that way for me in music, and specifically playing guitar. But with respect to this, it was really Rush Limbaugh that for me was the archetype and the architect, the icon of Christian talk radio. I first started listening to him in 1989. I think he'd been on the air for a year at that point. And I became a talk radio junkie because of him. In fact, Chris, let's play cut 2. We got a little bit of Rush from a speech at the MRC Gala several years ago.
Well, so it's very important that when I started, there is nothing else except National Review. And the Media Research Center is just kicking up, analyzing the media. But in terms of national broadcast media, there wasn't anything. And folks, well, I'm sure if you've been around long, it took off like a rocket. We started with 56 stations with a combined audience of people in a phone booth. And inside of a year, we were up to 250 stations, and nobody said it could be done. And after the first year, I became the obligatory racist, sexist, bigot, homophobe, because I'm conservative, and the left didn't know how to deal with it, and the media didn't know how to deal with it. And I'd never been called any of those things, and nobody ever thought I was any of those things, and nobody ever thought I ever hated anybody. But all of a sudden, that became who I was. I didn't know how to deal with it. I had nobody I was working with had any experience at it. Nobody that I worked with had ever been under assault, and I didn't know who to call. But the reason that it worked is not because my audience was a bunch of mind-numb robots and I was a Pied Piper leading him around. It's exactly what Cal Thomas said. But they found a seat for him. He's been standing here the whole night. I thought the stage seemed empty. People were validated. They thought, they believed it, they never heard it reflected in the media.
See, he blazed a trail. I mean, we kind of take conservative talk radio for granted now. Any town anywhere in the contiguous United States, you can flip through your radio dial and find conservative talk radio. But that man blazed a trail, and that trail we all get to enjoy the benefit of right now. And to me, there's only one image on the talk radio Mount Rushmore, and that's Rush. He could be timely and he could be timeless all at once. And to me, that's the mark of the high calling. That's what I'm striving for and trying to bring to you the best audience, I believe, anywhere. Because I believe that this is a great privilege and a great responsibility, and I take it really seriously. So with that said, I'm going to pivot to a call about hacky sack. Because, we get down to the meaty issues on this show. So we got Scott in Nashville, and I hope you can fill me in on what the deal is with hacky sack. Scott, what do you have?
Yeah, I'm right here. The idea with a hacky sack and kicking it in the circle is to see how long you can keep it up from falling and see what tricks you can perform. And when the person that drops it allows it to fall, they're the ones that lose.
So, but the person that drops it, like, you don't get to hit him or anything?
No.
You don't get to.
They just lose.
You don't get to tackle anybody or clothesline them or slam them to the ground or anything? I'm just being facetious, but I mean, it seems like a fun thing. I mean, obviously, I've seen people, and thanks for breaking it down, because I literally, honestly, all these years, I think hacky sack was invented in like 72 or something crazy like that. But it always seems like people had great fun. But again, I'm a type AAA. I got to have something that we're keeping score. And something where I can win. And, I've mellowed as I've gotten older, but it used to be, I didn't want to win. I wanted to crush you. And it didn't matter what it was. Uno, I want to crush you. You know what I mean? So for that reason, hacky sack didn't work for me. But anyway.
You got to keep in mind, Dez, the people that probably came up with this and played it a lot back in the day, they were really, really high.
Absolutely.
So, they were just doing the best they could just to keep the little sack up in the air. They couldn't worry about keeping score.
Well, here's the thing. Back when I was playing high school football, the two weren't mutually exclusive. You know what I'm saying? In fact, but most of those guys were actually on the soccer team, because back then soccer was the place for, the heads, as we used to call them. And if you were playing on the soccer team, you were definitely high while you were playing soccer. But I digress. Oh, man. You know what? I can't top this. This is a great time for a break. Super Talk 99.7 WTN, Dez Dickerson in for Brian Wilson on The Drive, and we'll be right back.
The state of Tennessee has had a lawsuit filed against them. Ron DeSantis suspending local state attorneys and large wildfires in Hawaii now fatal. I'll have those stories and more at 5:30. I'm Mac Morey right here on Super Talk 99.7 WTN.
Sly, the one and the only. This bass line, it's so simple and it just kind of cycles, but it's one of the best ever. Still don't know if Sly played it or if Larry Graham played it. I have a feeling Sly played that. I think it's one of those things where he just kind of heard it in his head and picked up the bass and started playing it. You know, I could ask Larry. I actually know Larry Graham. I could ask him, I suppose. But so we got something. Chris read me something from the text line that I got to have him share because this was in response to the soccer thing. Can you share that with us?
Yeah. Let's see. It was 7866. Or no, 0231 is the person that sent that one. They said, as the father of a former soccer player, that is still true.
I love it.
So apparently soccer players are still heads, I think, as you call them.
I guess they're still heads. Well, you know, they play the game with their heads or whatever. Yeah, some things never change.
Also had someone that said what a bunch of, this was 7866, said, what a bunch of amateurs. Everybody knows hacky sack is a drinking game. If you let it hit the ground, you drink.
See, that makes
sense.
There's more incentive there. See, that I can understand. See, now it's a tailgating game if in that context.
That's a good point.
Now I can, like before a Vandy game, because, except for that bright, shining moment when James Franklin had us, a winning team. Drinking at the tailgate party is kind of the highlight of the game. But no, not really. I bleed black and gold. I bleed two different colors if you have noticed. But I think a drinking game. I think that's the thing. Hacky sack is a drinking game. I think that has legs, as we say in the marketing business. So, speaking of stories that have immediate relevance and lasting significance, and you notice how I tied in the last segment to this one. I told you I'm learning. There's the unfolding and ongoing saga of Hunter Biden. The Biden, it's getting to the point where like the Biden crime family tagline is it's almost, again, it's such low hanging fruit that it's almost too easy. But with that said, it's an obvious both and, because on the one hand it's the car wreck you can't turn away from, so there's that sort of immediate relevance, but at the same time it's this potential extinction level event for our republic as we know it, kind of all at the same time. So you got kind of the weekend at Biden's, sycophants and enablers. They kind of remind me of the Heaven's Gate cult. Anybody remember the Heaven's Gate cult? Where there was like they were waiting for like some spaceship to come get him or something, and the leader convinced him, as cult leaders often do, that they all needed to like commit this mass suicide, but they wore matching tennis shoes. So one of the things I'm doing is I'm kind of monitoring the footwear amongst the cohort. Because if I see people wearing matching tennis shoes, that may be coming next. But as a case in point, comedian Jim Gaffigan was recently on the Joe Rogan podcast. And, here's the thing about Gaffigan. I mean, we've kind of watched a couple of his specials, and he's a funny guy, and he was, his stuff isn't particularly, partisan, not particularly, like blue, not that drives us away when there's a point to it, like Chappelle is very blue, but he's very clever and he's very funny. Other people, it's just potty mouth, and that's kind of all they can do. But, for context sake, again, his comedy generally isn't this sort of flaming zombie cohort far left, but he is majorly TDS. He is majorly Trump derangement syndrome. Doesn't come out in his comedy, but it did on the podcast. And he's one of those folks that assumes this sort of universal vilification of Donald Trump that surely everyone hates and fears Donald Trump as much as he does. That, he's not only a threat to democracy, but he's a threat to civilization and the existence of life in the universe or something. But at the same time, though, he adopts this very sympathetic tone regarding, Joe and Hunter Biden. So he was on with Joe Rogan, and Joe is not by any means a conservative, but the thing that I'll give him credit for is that he shows flashes of being a clear thinker. And there's some things he says that I think are crack pipe crazy, but other things he says where I'm like, well, yeah, that's very considered and thoughtful. And I applaud him for having the courage to kind of swim upstream with it. So anyway, we're going to dive a bit deeper into this. We're going to take a break. Super Talk 99.7 WTN. Dez Dickerson in for Brian Wilson on the drive, and we're going to be back in a bit.
It's 5:30. I'm Mac Maury with your top stories. Got wave 2 of the storms tonight expected after midnight. Right now, wave 1 has passed Middle Tennessee, but there are still 3 counties with a severe thunderstorm watch. That's until 8 p.m. in the mid-state: Bedford, Coffee, and Marshall County. Complete weather forecast, latest traffic report upcoming in 5 minutes. The state of Tennessee now being sued by a group of organizations in Memphis alleging that the redistricting plans that went into effect last year are, quote, intentionally discriminatory against black voters and other voters of color. Damon Hewitt, director of the Education Project at the NAACP Legal Defense and Education Fund, spoke on this lawsuit.
We're seeing the political play to mask and partisanship, to defiantly do whatever the other side thinks they can to ignore, to suppress the political voice and engagement of the black community. That's happening all over the country. And so this is a knife fight. You have to fight it out, duke it out, case by case, state by state, map by map.
The lawsuit also claims that there was a lack of transparency during the redistricting process in the state. It says if the plans remain in place, votes by people of color will continue to, quote, be diluted due to the selective redistricting. And in Florida, their governor suspends a local state's attorney for being soft on crime. Derek Dennis.
Florida Republican governor and presidential candidate Ron DeSantis taking aim at Orlando state's attorney Monique Worrell, a black Democrat, suspending her over criticism her office didn't do more to keep an offender behind bars. DeSantis calling Worrell's administration
clearly and fundamentally derelict, so as to constitute both neglect of duty and incompetence.
The offender in question, now a suspect in the shooting of 2 Orlando police officers last week. But Worrell says DeSantis was just looking for any reason to target her, so she's looking to take legal action.
And in Hawaii, officials are now confirming 6 deaths in large wildfires burning on the island of Maui. The National Guard is now deploying across the island. Hawaii Lieutenant Governor Sylvia Luke is asking tourists on Maui to go home and for no more to arrive. Hotel rooms will be prioritized for Maui residents, and Maui County Mayor Richard Bisson said that they have over 2,100 people in shelters. That is the latest news. Traffic and weather on the way. I'm Mac Maury, WTN News.
Now, see, that song just about endangered my neck because I just automatically, the head started bobbing automatically. But corn, yeah. So we're talking about Jim Gaffigan on Rogan's podcast, and it was a really sort of expansive and like far-reaching show. I think that's one of the things about the Rogan podcast that people find appealing because he has guests on and they just kind of go everywhere. So this is like almost a 3-hour show, so we're just zeroing in on one portion of it. But we're gonna play. Let's go ahead and play cut 3 and hear what Gaffigan had to say.
Look, Joe Biden's relationship with his son, or who obviously struggles with addiction. I mean, look, half of our friends struggle with addiction. It's like, he's a compassionate father. Is there some of that, like, let's make some money with our influence after we left office, or even
during office, when he was
even
vice
when we
president.
were senator or stuff like that? Is there some of that? Yeah.
It seems like there's a lot of that.
But compared to Trump, compared to like Jared getting a $2 billion contract.
So again, it's like the assumed like universal vilification of Donald Trump. And I'm not even going to go into the whataboutism and the political homerism and all that stuff. But I just want to focus on the statements, the sympathetic tone regarding Hunter and Joe Biden, and just the dismissive sort of minimization and the rationalization, and it's fascinating because it's typical like cohort stuff. He's just a dad supporting his kid. Well, first of all, half of our friends are struggling with addiction problems. Well, no. Do I know people? Well, of course, but not half my friends. That's not true. In fact, the trend amongst people, a lot of people that I know, my sort of, especially my friends that are more on the blue side of the spectrum, the trend there has been sobriety. There's an amazing move, and it's a thing with Gen Z. There's this amazing move into sobriety. So, first of all, I reject that out of hand. Well, we're going to justify it because, hey, all God's children are struggling with addiction. No. But then the other part of it was, well, he's just a dad supporting his kid. It's something any of us would do. Well, context is everything. I mean, if you're talking about Vito Corleone and Sonny, well, yeah, you'd go to this length. But for the rest of us, not so much. No, there are things I'm not going to support my kid in. You know what? If my son, I mean, I have an adult son that's 36, and he and his wife have a 3-year-old daughter and a son on the way in October. Youngest is just turned 10 and have a stepson in between, 17 years. Any of them, if they were committing heinous crimes, I'd drop a dime on them my doggone self. No, I'm not going to support that. So, no, it's not just a dad supporting his kid. Also, during the interview, well, let me back up and say this again. Good on Joe Rogan for pushing back and not letting the, everybody knows thing just kind of go by. But during the interview, I also have to mention that Rogan references his newfound openness to interviewing Donald Trump, because it's something he said in the past he wouldn't do. And I want to read something from an article in a publication called, The Street. Rogan has rarely shied away from controversial topics, though the podcast host has historically shied away from at least one guest, former President Trump. I've had the opportunity to have him on my show more than once, and I have said no every time, Rogan told podcast host Lex Friedman in June. I don't want to help him. I'm not interested in helping him. For years, this has been Rogan's stance. He's firmly held that he has no intention of bringing Trump on the platform, despite hosting other controversial figures, including Kanye West and RFK Jr. Now, tell me where you're going to hear those three names together. I think that'd make a great band, wouldn't it? Anyway, I digress. However, Rogan seems to have changed his tune, telling entrepreneur Patrick Bet-David that the possibility is very much on the table. When are you having Trump on? Bet-David asked. I don't know, Rogan answered coyly. I don't know, maybe. He added that it probably was something that needed to happen given the weight of his podcast. At a certain point in time, it would be interesting to hear his perspective on a lot of things. I would like to know what it is actually like when you get into office. What is it like versus perception? What is it actually like when you get in that building? So, interesting. Having Trump on could boost numbers and visibility. Not that Rogan really needs it. So here's the thing. He, some on the left, they would say that, he's evolved in his perspective. Clear thinkers, we just call that having a change of heart and rethinking and actually kind of, growing a brain and changing your mind. So again, good on him for pushing back on Gaffigan and being willing to rethink and to reset with respect to it would be an important thing. It would be a fascinating thing, actually, for Trump and Rogan to sit down. I would want to hear that. Totally want to hear that. And, I think it's an opportunity for a lot of people, if they want to, if they're intellectually honest, to kind of, get a different perspective where Donald Trump is concerned. And there's some people that, it's chronic TDS, and it's never going to change. I mean, some folks, we talk about, separating the clear thinkers from the Kool-Aid drinkers. We got folks that are on a Kool-Aid IV, and, that's not going to change. But so I'm going to say this. The Gaffigan is emblematic of the cohort class across the spectrum. In this area, pop culture, academia, entertainment, the social media ecosystem, all of that stuff, because they'd rather believe that zombies came and manipulated, the overtime coin toss in the Chiefs-Bills playoff game, rather than simply acknowledge empirical data and stark reality. Because it's not about right and wrong anymore. It's about reality and unreality. So the tribe of it is if we say it is on full display in this Biden slow motion destruction and disassembling of the republic. And there are plenty of sycophants and supporters across the board in insignificant places. And let me say this. There's also a VIP section of hell occupied by the media coven at this point in time. ABC and NBCBS and all the rest. The unbridled support of all of this, let's just say this. Could this have been achieved? Could this have been executed without this mass media support? And not only now, but going back into the prelude that was the Obama administration? Of course not. Because never before has the press, the political class, the intelligence complex, and the tech cabal collectively orchestrated a crime wave of this magnitude. It's never happened before. At least if it has, I sure don't know about it. Now, I will say this. Obama was the media-powered sort of emperor's new clothes prelude to this. But Biden is the full-on alien abduction. And it's the car wreck we can't look away from. So we're actually going to dive deeper into this, and we're going to kind of pivot into the Obama factor, because there's something that I think has been woefully overlooked, not just during the Biden years here, but leading up to it. And we're gonna dive into this a bit. So Super Talk 99.7 WTN, Dez Dickerson in for Brian, and we are going to be right back.
A Roth IRA versus a traditional IRA. Which one should we do? A lot of people struggle over this particular decision. And I'll just give you a couple tools to figure out what might be better for you. Think about it this way. Let's say if I had $1,000 that I was thinking about investing, that was income, $1,000 of income. With an IRA, let's say that you're in a 30% tax bracket. Let's say there is such a thing. And you want to put this money in an IRA. You're going to save $300 in taxes. Now, if you go post-tax with like a Roth IRA, this is how much goes into the Roth IRA. Now, let's say that later on down the road, we have this money and it didn't grow at all, just to keep the math really simple. And let's say that at some point in the future, you're in a lower tax bracket, because the way our tax system works is that your first income is taxed at a really low rate, and then you get up into higher rates, 10%, 12%, 22%, and so on and so forth. It gets higher. If you're earning income and you're at that particular tax rate up there, you might want to avoid that tax rate right now and take the income at a later point in time when you're in a lower average tax rate. Now let's say that you're in a 10% bracket down here when you pull the money. How much are you going to pay in taxes? 10% of $1,000 is $100. How much do you get to spend? $900. Well, even though I didn't have growth, I had growth because of the difference between my tax rate here and here. And that's the idea. That's one of the things that we look at. We look at Social Security taxation, income taxation, and a lot of factors that might drive you into higher or lower brackets in the future. If you want to learn more about our approach to investing and financial planning, go to paulwinkler.com and set up a free 15-minute phone call, or call 615-851-1950.
A Utah man dead after alleged threats towards the president in an FBI raid. A child kidnapped in Nashville. And Geodis Park went crazy last night for Nashville SC, and it didn't all stay in the stands. I'll have those stories and more at 6 o'clock. I'm Mac Morey right here, Super Talk 99.7 WTN.
Super Talk on the drive. I was just thinking earlier, because sometimes your mind will wander and you're kind of watching old Popeye cartoons in your head during the commercials. But I was thinking about the number of songs with the word drive in them. I mean, everything from songs where the word drive is the title, like Drive by the Cars, Baby You Can Drive My Car by the Beatles. Anyway, now see, some of you are going to latch onto that and not be able to stop. In fact, text in every song you can think of with the word drive in the title.
Oh, boy.
I know. I'm not going to be watching them because I get distracted. But Chris is going to monitor it for us. So, we're on the drive. And as I said earlier, this is my first time doing the drive time slot. And it's an extra hour longer than the slots that I'm accustomed to. And, I feel good. I mean, we are rounding the turn into the fourth hour here in a bit. And I'm feeling good. It reminds me of back when, I did a stint driving taxi cab back in my sort of late teens, early 20s, playing in bands and having to do some things in between bands to earn money. And there was this thing called riding the dog, where you start driving at midnight and finish at 6 a.m. And at first, you had to kind of pull nose hairs to wake yourself up, that kind of thing. But not that I'm doing that here. But this is great. I'm enjoying myself. I hope you are too. 99.7 WTN. Dez Dickerson in for Brian Wilson. We'll be right back.
It's 6 o'clock. I'm Mac Maury with your top stories. Right now, 76 degrees in Nashville, and most of Tennessee right now experiencing some form of showers and some small thunderstorms embedded in a couple areas. You look at McMinnville and then up more north in Clarksville, some storms there, but nothing severe. No severe thunderstorm watches or warnings in all of Tennessee. All of those alerts are now gone or eliminated, and could see another, or expecting more severe weather later tonight. That second round should come sometime after midnight. Could see high winds and a small chance for isolated tornadoes. Forecast, latest traffic report on the way in 5 minutes. President Biden heading to Utah tonight. Before his arrival, a man suspected of threatening to kill the president has died in FBI raid. Alex Stone.
On Monday, Craig Robertson of Provo, Utah, was allegedly posting his desires to kill the president during a presidential visit to Utah this week. Robertson had allegedly been posting numerous threats against the president and other prominent figures, including California Governor Gavin Newsom and those who were prosecuting President Trump. In some postings, he challenged the FBI to knock on his door and to come get him. That's exactly what an FBI team did on Wednesday morning. In the process, Robertson was shot and killed by federal agents, according to multiple sources. He was charged with 3 counts, including making threats against the president.
The FBI made a statement saying that they're reviewing an agent-involved shooting that happened around 6 o'clock this morning. In a crime in Tennessee, a man was arrested for allegedly assaulting a 14-year-old girl at a Nashville bus station. Here's Channel 4's Sharon Dankwa.
Surveillance cameras caught 39-year-old Anthony Fulton following a 14-year-old girl up the WeGo bus station stairs. Police say he pushed himself onto the side of her body multiple times before she ran to this ticketing booth for help. Police instantly arrested him and charged him with sexual battery.
And people still believe they're unsafe even after quick action was made by law enforcement. WeGo officials say there have been 10 arrests at the station this year alone, but never for sexual-related crimes. And officials fear more than 36 migrants were killed in a shipwreck in Estella Catera.
Both Italian officials and UN agencies say 41 migrants are believed to have died in a shipwreck that happened last week in the central Mediterranean. 4 survivors were taken to the Italian island of Lampedusa, telling Italian officials they were on a boat carrying 45 people, including 3 children, when it capsized. The survivors include a 13-year-old boy, a woman, and 2 men. They were brought to land almost a week after their ship sunk.
And here in Nashville, 18 people, including 7 teenagers, were detained for trespassing at Geodis Park after trying to run on the field during last night's soccer game between Nashville SC and Club America. The 7 minors were between the ages of 13 and 17, while the 11 adults ranged in age from 23 to 56. Authorities say most or all of those fans were from the visiting team. Nashville SC did win the match on penalty kick 6-5 after a 2-2 tie at the end of 90-minute regulation. That is the latest news. Traffic and weather on the way. I'm Mac Maury, WTN News.
All right. Heading into the fourth hour, Dez Dickerson with you, in for Brian. And enjoying it, as always. You know, I just, I was flipping through the channels during the commercials to, I don't know, find something else to pay no attention to. And I happened to flip across a show called Dr. Pimple Popper. Have you ever seen that?
I have never seen it. I've heard people talk about it, and that's enough for me.
Oh, my goodness. I can't unsee just that second that went by. It's like, let's think of the most disgusting things that we can put on TV.
Some people really get into watching that, and they are sick individuals, as far as I'm concerned.
I am in total agreement because I can't even think of a reason. Oh, my goodness. I cannot unsee it. Okay. Well, only in America can you come into public office as a community organizer and leave the Oval Office a mega millionaire. Only in America. The estimates of the Obama's net worth run as high as $100 million, upwards of $100 million. Not bad work. So, on the one hand, we all know about the home in Martha's Vineyard and how much attention that gets. But the one thing that's kind of stayed under the radar is actually a much more significant, if nothing else for its strategic location, a much more significant property. The Obamas own an 8,200 square foot residence in not Chicago, not L.A., not, Hawaii, but in D.C. In D.C. Yep. See, they did what presidents historically do not do. In fact, most of them try to get as far from D.C. as they possibly can when they're done. But they bought a house in the Kalorama neighborhood of D.C. that's less than a 10-minute drive from the White House. And in fact, I guarantee you Secret Service can whisk him there within 5 minutes. So, kind of forget about the whole Manchurian candidate thing. In reality, even though, Obama may have been the opening act kind of for this zombie apocalypse that we're in right now, but don't think for a minute that he ever left the building, because he didn't. I mean, he didn't. Last Thursday, there's a group of guys that I meet with every Thursday morning, and we smoke cigars, talk heatedly about politics and other pressing matters, and we study the Bible. So yeah, we smoke cigars and study the Bible. I know. And we talked about this. Someone brought up the question, who do you think is actually running things in this administration right now? And I said, well, of course it's Obama. It has been from the beginning. And some agreed, some didn't. But it's never been in doubt. And I, among other people, have been saying this for years, but it's not only what some of us have been saying, but Barack Obama himself said it out loud in an interview with Colbert in 2015. Can we play cut 4?
I've said this before. People would ask me, knowing what you know now, do you wish like you had a third term? And I used to say, you know what? If I could make an arrangement where I had a stand-in, a front man or front woman, and they had an earpiece in, and I was just in my basement in my sweats, looking through the stuff, and then I could sort of deliver the lines, but somebody else was doing all the talking and ceremony. Wow. I'd be fine with that because I found the work fascinating. I mean, I write about the even on my worst days, I found puzzling out, these big, complicated, difficult issues, especially if you were working with some great people, to be professionally really satisfying.
So again, I'm not the only one, but when he made that statement to Colbert, the thing that first struck me, two things. Number one, that was his actual plan. Number one. Number two, it was already in the works. Because it was straight up Wizard of Oz, pay no attention to that man behind the curtain stuff. And if we should know anything about Barack Obama in retrospect, it's that he always telegraphed his throws. And again, it's football season, so I got football jargon on the mind. But he telegraphed his shows from fundamentally changing America, remember that one, to what we just heard, the words that came out of his mouth. He was like a quarterback staring down his receiver. He always told us what he was going to do. Some people took it seriously, some didn't. So there's a story, an article in a publication called Tablet, on Obama, but it's actually an interview with an individual who wrote a very, very extremely well-researched and well-done biography called Rising Star, an author named David Garrow. And the book actually came out in 2017. But, I got to give credit where credit is due. I was flipping through the radio last week, and it was actually Buck Sexton that I heard refer to this story, to this article. And it was intriguing to me because, as I said, we had just, that day had this conversation in our group called Holy Smokes, by the way. What else would you call it? It was like, well, there it is, out of the mouths of two or more witnesses. So, and here's the thing about Garrow. The guy is a respected, legitimate, and celebrated historian, civil rights historian specifically. He's not some, right-wing zealot with an axe to grind. But the interesting thing about this book is that although there were a number of things in it where he corroborated things that were dismissed as, wild accusation and tabloid nonsense, well, he tracked people down and interviewed folks and corroborated things. But in spite of this man's gravitas as a historian, the book was dismissed. The book got buried, essentially. But it was because he was, as we always see with the cohort, he was too close to the center of the bullseye. And with Obama especially, they did everything they could to keep us from anything resembling accurate backstory and data on him, because they wanted the myth. And Obama himself was responsible as much as anybody for constructing the myth. So in the book, Garrow goes after and dismantles significant aspects of that myth. And Samuels, in the interview, kind of revives some of the book's most pointed revelations. And there's some heavy-duty stuff in it. I mean, and some of it is like kind of mind-blowingly, and you'll have to read the article. I'm not going to go into it. Some of it is mind-blowing. For example, I mean, there's a woman that he actually lived with in his college years, asked her not once but twice to marry him. This is, before Michelle. And through all of the Obama administration, all the Obama years, there's no press, mainstream or otherwise, that ever bothered to try to find this woman and talk to her. And she was hiding in plain sight. She's a professor at Oberlin College, for crying out loud. So anyway, when we come back from break, I'm going to read some excerpts from this piece. It's fascinating. Now, I'm going to, warn you up front. It's sort of very densely written. If you were going to compare, USA Today is kind of like chicken broth. And this is more like, sort of chunky beef stew, just so you're ready. But we're going to read through some excerpts and dive into this stuff some after the break. Super Talk 99.7 WTN, Dez Dickerson in for Brian Wilson on the drive. Be back in a second. Yeah. See, normally this is the song I'll open the show with because it just kind of, gets the blood pressure up in the good kind of way. But here we are. Here we are on the drive, and I'm delighted to be with you today. We're revisiting the Obama years from a perspective that, again, I believe this got so overlooked, but it was so, as Adam Schiff was fond of saying, corruption in plain sight, evidence of collusion in plain sight. And there were things that went on both during and after the Obama years that were just in plain sight. And, obviously the ABC and NBC-CBS, cabal was going to give them cover, but man, why was everybody so silent? So anyway, in this piece in Tablet by David Samuels, he, in talking about this bizarre, and not bizarre, obviously it was purposeful, this fulfillment of what Obama said in an interview with Stephen Colbert. They stayed in D.C., and the only other president in like the post-Civil War era to do that was like Woodrow Wilson, and that was because he had strokes and couldn't be moved. So Samuels kind of attributes it to, there was such a tumultuous, like just bizarre explosion of activity after Donald Trump took office, that because of that, folks were distracted and the book Rising Star didn't do well. I disagree with that. The book was buried. If people want to, sort of fluff a book or a movie or a TV show, they can do it. But if they want to bury it, not always. Sometimes things get through in spite of them, but they can bury it too. So at any rate, he in this article, he goes on to say, with respect to the Obamas staying in D.C. after his term, yet there was also evidence to suggest that the idea Obama was no longer concerned with power or involved with power was itself part of a new set of myths being woven by and around the ex-president. First, the Obamas never left town. Instead, they bought a large brick mansion in the center of Washington's Kalorama neighborhood, violating a norm governing the transfer of presidential power, which has been breached only once in post-Civil War history, again by Woodrow Wilson, who could not physically be moved after suffering a series of debilitating strokes. In the Obama's case, the reason for staying in D.C. was ostensibly that their youngest daughter, Sasha, wanted to finish high school with her class at Sidwell Friends. In June 2019, Sasha went off to college, yet her parents remained in Washington. By then, it was clear to any informed observer that the Obamas' continuing presence in the nation's capital was not purely a personal matter, to an extent that has never been meaningfully reported on. Well, you think? The Obamas served as both the symbolic and practical heads of the Democrat Party shadow government. He calls it the shadow government that resisted Trump. Another phenomenon that defied prior norms. The fact that these were not normal times could be adduced by even a passing glance at the front pages of the country's daily newspapers, which were filled with claims that the 2000 election had been stolen by Russia and that Trump was a Russian agent. See, remember that when claiming that the election had been stolen was actually okay with the left. Funny how things change in 4 years. Given the stakes, then, it seemed churlish to object to the Obamas' quiet family life in Kalorama, or to report on the comings and goings of Democratic political operatives and office seekers from their mansion, or to the swift substitution of Obama as party leader for Hillary Clinton, who, after all, was the person who had supposedly been cheated out of the presidency. Why even mention the strangeness of the overall setup, which surely paled next to the raw menace of Donald Trump, who lurched from one crisis to the next while lashing out at his enemies and probably selling out the country to Vladimir Putin? A big question mark. And he's obviously being extremely facetious. In a normal country, the exhaustive report issued in April 2019 by special counsel Robert Mueller which uncovered no evidence that the 2016 election had been decided by Russian actions, let alone that Trump was a Russian agent, might have been a cue for the Obamas to go home to Chicago or Hawaii or Martha's Vineyard. The moment of crisis was over. Russiagate turned out to have been a politically motivated hoax, just as Trump had long insisted. But while the attention of Republicans in Washington turned to questioning the FBI, more careful observers could not fail to notice that the FBI had hardly acted alone. After all, Russiagate had not originated with the Bureau, but with the Clinton campaign, which, having failed to get even sympathetic mainstream media outlets like the New York Times and the Washington Post to bite on its fantastical allegations, was reduced to handing off the story to campaign press apparatchiks like Slate and Mother Jones. The fact that the story only got bigger after Clinton lost the election was due to Obama's CIA director, John Brennan, who in November and December of 2016 helped elevate Russiagate from a failed Clinton campaign ploy to a priority of the American national security apparatus, using a hand-picked team of CIA analysts under his direct control to validate his thesis. If Brennan was the instrument, the person who signed the executive order that turned Brennan's thesis into a time bomb under Trump's desk was Barack Obama. The election of 2020, the election of Joe Biden in 2020, gave the Obamas even more reasons to stay in town. The whispers about Biden's cognitive decline, which began during his bizarre COVID-sheltered basement campaign, were mostly dismissed as partisan attacks on a politician who had always been gaffe-ridden. That's it. Yet, as President Biden continued to fall off bicycles, misremember basic names and facts, and mix long and increasingly weird passages of Dada-esque nonsense with autobiographical whoppers during his public appearances, corn pop anybody? It became hard not to wonder how poor the president's capacities really were, and who was actually making decisions in a White House staffed top to bottom with core Obama loyalists. When Obama turned up at the White House, staffers and press crowded around him, leaving President Biden talking to the drapes, which is not a metaphor, but a real thing that happened. So that Obama might enjoy serving as a third-term president in all but name, running the government from his iPhone, was a thought expressed in public by Obama himself. We heard the clip. So even with all these clues, the Washington Press Corps, fresh off their years of broadcasting fantasies about secret communications links between Trump Tower and the Kremlin, seemed unable to imagine, let alone report, on Obama's role in the government. Wow. Somebody said it out loud. Awesome. We're going to take a break. Super Talk 99.7 WTN. Dez Dickerson in for Brian Wilson. We'll be right back. Well, as we're heading around the clubhouse turn toward that 19th hole, thank you for letting me be myself again. It's been a good day. You know, we covered a lot of ground. We're not done yet. We got Aubrey in Murfreesboro that wants to weigh in on this topic of Obama in D.C. Aubrey, welcome.
Thank you, Dez. I have enjoyed your show this afternoon very much.
Oh, thank you.
I want to give my opinion on why I think Obama stayed in D.C. I know he's not been there full time, but I think he's had a full-time staff there. I think that house was used as a headquarters or a workshop for Valerie Jarrett, Susan Rice, and John Podesta to carry on the work of Obama, because I feel like that he never stopped after leaving office in January of 2017 when Trump did his first inauguration. I really believe that when Biden went into office, of course, we all know that he's just a puppet, that he was placed there. And I think that this whole operation has just gone full steam ahead, and you can see Obama's fingerprints on everything.
Absolutely. I agree with you wholeheartedly. And there's some names that we could add to that list, because essentially they just kind of lifted up the hood and dropped all of the Obama sort of cartel into the Biden White House. And I agree that, as I said before, at the time that he did that Colbert interview, the plan was already in place, and they never missed a beat. They never broke their stride. And, it would be foolish to think otherwise. Again, Barack Obama telegraphed every pass he ever threw. Everything that he ever did, he told us he was going to do it. And the third term thing, the Colbert interview isn't the only reference. I mean, all you got to do is Google it. There are a number of other places where he kind of dropped that hint. So, I don't think there's a clear thinker out there who's bought into the ludicrous notion that, a guy who can't remember his name is somehow running the show in, the most powerful office on the face of the planet. And nobody in their right mind. Well, I take that back. The Unreality cohort believes it, defends it, because it's the nature of the delusion. It's the nature of the, I don't even want to call it a fantasy, because fantasies are a different animal. This is a full-blown, psychotic break. So here's the thing. We have right now a situation where a former president has been operating, we can go all the way there and call it a shadow government in effect. And not from a, black helicopter, tinfoil hat conspiracy standpoint, but from a very pragmatic, sort of a practical standpoint. The Democrat apparatus was more than happy to continue with, the emperor's new clothes. And they, look, whether Joe Biden was chosen as an empty suit to facilitate the plan or whatever the case was, that's almost immaterial to me. The reality is that the outworking of it is that, again, that entire staff, and our caller Aubrey hit that right on the head, that the entire Obama staff was kept in place. There's no reason to do that. I mean, presidents often cherry pick folks from, prior administrations, and they'll pick according to, certain kinds of backgrounds, certain resumes and areas of expertise, et cetera. But in my lifetime, I don't recall any presidential staff like I said, just unbolt it and pull it out of the chassis and we're just going to drop it in. I've never seen that at any other time. So, again, I applaud David Samuels, for saying it out loud, because it's hard for me to believe that there hasn't been more made of this on the clear thinker, conservative, well, Republican, I can see it, but on that side of the ledger. And again, it's another example, I think, of our side just kind of majoring in the minors. I mean, there are so many unimportant, unserious issues that have had time and attention and money thrown at them. How about exposing the daylights out of this? The only time in the post-Civil War era that a president after his term broke, like so many other long-standing, that they're not constitutional laws, but they're long-standing principles that people, presidents, former presidents, abided by for years and years and decades. And there were others. I mean, you don't criticize, as a former president, you don't criticize a sitting president. All sorts of Obama broke all sorts of precedent, but this one is huge. This one is huge, and there needed to be the brightest of lights shown on this situation. I mean, it's one thing for the cohort and for ABC and NBCBS and that whole cabal to do what they always do and kind of give us the pay no attention to that man behind the curtain thing. I mean, I used to call it the blood-soaked shirt syndrome. I used to say that during the Obama years, had he strode up to the podium just soaked in blood, head to toe, with a machete in one hand dripping blood, and I know this is over the top, but you'll never forget it. A machete dripping blood in one hand and Dick Cheney's severed head in the other hand, and he walked up to the microphone and said, I don't know anything about the disappearance of Dick Cheney. I like you, I read it in the newspaper. What the press corps would do is, the president said he knows nothing about it. The president read it in the newspaper like the rest of us. Well, that's what he said about everything. If that were true, he was the most absent and uninformed president of all time, and that wasn't true. That's not what he said. I mean, that's not what he did. It's what he said, but it's not what he did. So, again, bottom line, they did not stay in D.C. for no reason. There's not, and let's go back during the administration. There was a group of journalists and media folks that met, I don't remember if it was weekly or bi-weekly, George Stephanopoulos, or as I love to call him, George Snuffleupagus, among them. And George, there was like a bicycle path back and forth between like ABC and the Obama staff. Oh, he's on the staff. No, he's not on the staff. Oh, he's the press secretary. And they had meetings with the sitting president. That was unprecedented. Anyway, all this stuff was in plain sight. Plain sight. We've got Cedric in Kentucky. Cedric, what do you have for us?
Yes, I'm 64 years old, and I've seen a lot. I've been in them politics for about 35 years. I mean, voting and things of that nature. And I just had a question. When you all select someone as a candidate, do you do a in-depth investigation on the individual?
See, first of all, we don't get to select the candidate. You know what I mean? At the end of the day, there's a slate of folks that run in the primary. And, right now that slate's getting bigger and bigger. But those candidates for the nomination are selected and vetted ostensibly by the party and then voted on by the people. But there are situations, for example, and we got to go to a break here in a second, but when John McCain came back from the dead to win the nomination, and by that I mean he ran out of money, he had to let his staff go. I can still remember the news footage of him schlepping through airports carrying his own luggage, and he was the only one on the campaign trail. And then all of a sudden, he ends up being the nominee. You can't tell me that there was not something, and part of it was, again, in the open, part of it was in states with an open primary where you could vote in either party. You know, the cohort is smart in some ways, in some degree. They made sure that their folks went and voted for the candidate they thought they could beat. So in the primary, Democrat, vote Republican and vote for this guy. So the idea that we vet and choose a candidate, well, you should know who you're voting for. But, you know, when it gets down to it, whoever the candidate is the candidate. And you really didn't get to decide who was chosen other than voting for what there is to vote for. Super Talk 99.7 WTN, Dez Dickerson in for Brian. We'll be back.
A Roth IRA versus a traditional IRA. Which one should we do? A lot of people struggle over this particular decision. And I'll just give you a couple tools to figure out what might be better for you. Think about it this way. Let's say if I had $1,000 that I was thinking about investing, that was income, $1,000 of income. With an IRA, let's say that you're in a 30% tax bracket. Let's say there is such a thing. And you want to put this money in an IRA. You're going to save $300 in taxes. Now, if you go post-tax with like a Roth IRA, this is how much goes into the Roth IRA. Now, let's say that later on down the road, we have this money and it didn't grow at all, just to keep the math really simple. And let's say that at some point in the future, you're in a lower tax bracket, because the way our tax system works is that your first income is taxed at a really low rate, and then you get up into higher rates, 10%, 12%, 22%, and so on and so forth. It gets higher. If you're earning income and you're at that particular tax rate up there, you might want to avoid that tax rate right now and take the income at a later point in time when you're in a lower average tax rate. Now let's say that you're in a 10% bracket down here when you pull the money. How much are you going to pay in taxes? 10% of $1,000 is $100. How much do you get to spend? $900. Well, even though I didn't have growth, I had growth because of the difference between my tax rate here and here. And that's the idea. That's one of the things that we look at. We look at Social Security taxation, income taxation, and a lot of factors that might drive you into higher or lower brackets in the future. If you want to learn more about our approach to investing and financial planning, go to paulwinkler.com and set up a free 15-minute phone call or call 615-851-1950.
Well, it's been real. As always, just more fun than playing in water. So happy to have had the opportunity to be with you and to be with you on your drive today. And hope that you have a wonderful remainder of your week. We're glad to hear that Brian is on the mend. And from what I understand, he's planning on being back on the air tomorrow. You know what? We are in an awesome period in history, and we're getting to see things that none of us expected to see. But we are living in times that people are going to read about at some point and go, are you serious? So be of good cheer, because we're going to keep doing what we do, and we'll see you next time.